One of the worst movies I've ever seen. I'm totally thrilled. This is a nightmare, mesmerizing. All these comments have a one thing in common. There's about a movie where Sean Connery runs around in a man's bikini, shoots a revolver and tries to destroy an utopian world. This is a cine underground segment where I talk about weird, not so famous, sometimes even crazy but very interesting movies, and today we have Zardoz, a film inspired by Stanley Kubrick that took the place of The Lord of the Rings and made people forget about James Bond, a movie that flopped at the box office but became a cult classic. Imagine a giant flying stone head pouring out guns, and suddenly it screams, "The penis is evil, guns are good," and that's just the start of the movie. Yes, Zardoz can be confusing, but let's take everything step by step. So, 1974, this year brought out The Godfather Part 2, Chinatown with Jack Nicholson,
Sorry, Mr. Gilbert.
Ingmar Bergman's Scent from a Marriage, The Return of the Tall Blonde Man with Pierre Richard. I listed this just to give a sense of the time, to better imagine what was happening in cinema in 1974. By the way, that year also saw Killdozer and, for example, Phase 4, which I talked about in the episode before last of this segment, so there was plenty of strange cinema too. And then comes John Boorman's Zardoz. A couple of years earlier, the director gained fame with the dramatic thriller Deliverance, starring Jon Voight and Burt Reynolds. Deliverance got 3 Oscar nominations, and even though it didn't win, it was a real success. Both audiences and critics liked it. You can read about how much Quentin Tarantino loves this film in his book Cinema Speculations. And after Deliverance, Boorman could take more care in choosing his next project, hoping to secure a bigger budget from the studios. But even before Zardoz, Boorman had ambitious ideas. In the late 60s, he decided to adapt The Lord of the Rings, and the project was moving along quite normally. A script was written, and it was even discussed with Tolkien. The writer passed away in 1973. But the money wasn't enough, and the project was delayed. So far delayed, in fact, that the script now just sits in Marquette University. So if you ever find yourself in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, be sure to check it out. And so, after making Deliverance, Boorman didn't return to the idea of filming The Lord of the Rings. Instead, he took on this very Zardoz. I'll try to tell the main part of the story in a simple way and without spoilers, so no need to worry for now. When we get to the important moments, I'll make sure to give you a warning. So, the year is 2293. Civilization is split into 2 parts, the outer world and the inner world. The outer one is just ruins, destroyed cities and chaos. In the outer world live the so-called brutals, divided into 2 types, exterminators and savages. The exterminators killed and enslaved the savages. It's cruel but pretty straightforward. The inner world is a true made paradise. It's literally a created paradise, controlled by an all-powerful computer. People there are immortal, and if anything happens to them, they are reborn. They also have their own laws. Breaking them can make you age several years instantly. The worst offenders are turned into crazy, half-blind old people. They are called renegades. And this inner world is slowly being eaten by a plague, apathy. More and more members of the paradise community became apathics. They don't care about anything at all, they just exist. The story begins with Zed, a resident of the outer world, deciding to sneak into the inner world. It's important to know that, even though he is from the outer world, he is not a savage, he is an exterminator. Zed sneaks into a giant stone hut called Zardoz. It gives orders to the exterminators, usually to attack the savages. Then Zed kills the person controlling Zardoz and enters the inner world. This world is also called the Vortex, and that name is not random. Vortex means whirl or whirlpool. It's like a spiral flow, exactly what happens inside the imagined paradise. People there are constantly reborn, and there is no way out. It's a closed circle. The vortex is surrounded by an energy dome that can be crossed easily, but Zed was clever enough to get through using the stone head. He did it to destroy the vortex, to destroy the inner world. Later, I'll tell more about the story and the ideas of the film, but for now, I'll pause the plot summary so I don't spoil it for those who haven't seen the movie yet. I'm sure the excitement began as soon as you saw Sean Connery playing Zed, but he almost wasn't in the film, because at first the role was given to Burt Reynolds, who had already worked with director John Boorman on Deliverance. but Reynolds couldn't take the role. Some say it was because of illness, so I didn't find any proof of that, so the reason could be anything, but in the end it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that Sean Connery had just quit playing James Bond and wanted to break free from the spy image. He even struggled to find work because people only saw him as Bond. The offer to play in Zardoz was a great chance to show a new side of himself, and he took this very strange role with impressive seriousness. That seriousness is hard to call either a plus or a minus for the film, but it definitely highlights how unusual everything is. He was paired with Charlotte Rampling, who had just left modeling and was starting to conquer the big screen. In the same year as Zardoz, Liliana Cavani's film The Night Porter was released. That film brought Rampling fame, though partly scandalous. The scenes of sexual violence in it were very bold for that time. The story about a relationship between a former concentration camp guard and a prisoner sparked heated debates and was even banned in Italy. One of Charlotte Rampling's most recent roles is the Reverend Mother in Villeneuve's Dune. The film didn't have an easy time with money. Warner Bros. Said no, even though Boorman claimed he had made them a lot of money with Deliverance. 20th Century Fox had to be persuaded for a long time because of the unusual script. And Sean Connery wasn't cheap either. At first, John Boorman wanted to continue the idea of metaphysical sci-fi that started with Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, but he planned to set it only 5 years into the future, not too far ahead. He planned to make a film about a university professor who was obsessed with a student. After she disappeared, he went searching for her in the commune where she lived. Boorman even visited different hippie communes for research, and walking through them gave him the idea to set the story in the distant future, after society had collapsed. I guess he didn't enjoy the communes very much. Here, let's add some context about what was happening at that time and what led John Boorman to create Zardoz. It was a time of political turmoil, economical problems and cultural change. Yes, that could describe almost any year in any century. The world was feeling the effects of the 1973 oil crisis. Fuel prices were rising, Western countries had restrictions, and the word inflation was everywhere in the news. In the US, the Watergate scandal was heating up, and the war in Vietnam was still going on. In culture, there was a spirit of freedom and experimentation. Rock music was getting louder and bolder. Movies were challenging censorship. And in science, people were exploring space and dreaming of a technology age. People felt that the old order was fading and a new world was still to be built. What was happening in the world, along with the overall mood of anxiety and mistrust, also affected the making of the film. It was filmed in Ireland, which worked well for the story and the budget, but it caused a few problems. There were a lot of guns in the film, and this was the first problem, because at the time Ireland had a ban on importing weapons due to the tense situation and aero activity. They managed to deal with it. They scraped together enough rifles. The second problem was a nude woman. In this video we don't show any nudity, even though the film has a lot, so as not to upset YouTube's algorithms. And Boorman wasn't afraid to anger the conservative locals, who were unhappy about public nudity and the film. They even held protests. When the film came out, it was crushed. At the time, it seems pretentious, sometimes funny and mostly just absurd. Critics called Boorman's work self-indulgent and over-the-top. I wouldn't say it can still be called that, but in today's age of post-irony, Zardoz feel a bit different, sometimes even fresh, so it still makes you smile in places, especially when Sean Connery is too serious. Now I warning, there may be spoilers ahead, so it's better to pause and come back to the video after you've watched the film. The film got its name, and they have got in the form of a stone head that controls the outside world, from Frank Bauman's book The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. The name Zardoz comes from the book, which also appears in the film and plays an important role. It's this book that helps the main character realize that their world is somehow wrong. Zardoz's big head, like the Wizard of Oz, inspires fear and represents power, but in reality it doesn't have much straight. People believe it without asking questions. They just follow its orders, killing others like themselves, because the big stone head told them to. The wild, chaotic outside world is set against the inner, apathetic paradise of the immortals, and to get from one to the other, you have to use this head, which that does. The stone head acts like Charon, carrying the main character to the world of the immortals, but in truth, these people are already dead inside. Throughout the film, John Boorman strongly shows that life is valuable because it is finite. The inner world is a place where no one has a purpose and almost no feelings remain. A plague of apathy is spreading through the pseudo-paradise, and even without it, the society doesn't look healthy. They can do anything because they are not limited, not by death, time or even danger, since they can be reborn if something happens. But it's exactly because of this lack of limits that they do nothing. In the end, this metaphor also works for creative freedom. When there are no limits, it can actually be harder to create. That's why you can set some kind of boundaries. I'll make videos about movies, I'll make videos about varied movies. At the same time, in the world of the vortex, where there's so many naked bodies, there's no place for sex, because sex means lives, and life leads to death. Boorman shows that one can't exist without the other, that both sides of the coin matter. And there's also an important point about technology. Now when everyone is talking about AI, it feels very relevant. The vortex, the paradise part of the world, was created with technology, and it was programmed so that no one could shut it down, not even its creator. The man who created the vortex later shows up in the place where they keep all the crazy old people, the ones who ended up like that because they broke the rules. So people ended up trapped inside paradise. Most of them want to die, but they can't, because that's how this world was programmed. It all feels a lot like a technological prison. Here, of course, it turns into a talk about class and class conflict. The ruling elite, the suffering savages, and the enforcers, those same savages who were given the whip. The outside world is dirty and dangerous, but full of energy. The inside world is beautiful and calm, but empty, and harmony lies somewhere in between. In a way, Boorman made a warning film, showing that immortality, control, and perfect condition can destroy the human spirit. And only risk, patience, and change can bring back a person's taste of life. Years later, the director said that for him, Zardoz became a school of failures and a lesson in humility. When you feel on top of the world, that's usually when you are most likely to fall. After Zardoz, Boorman made Exorcist 2, The Heretic, which seems to have been the low point of his career. But after this poor sequel to a classic horror, he went on to make many more films, including Excalibur. This interpretation of the King Arthur legend came out in 1981 and was also meant to replace a planned adaptation of The Lord of the Rings. Some ideas even carried over from Zardoz. Zardoz itself, trashed by critics and mocked by audiences when it first came out, became more popular today. It can sometimes look naive, sometimes ridiculous, but it doesn't feel like outdated cinema with outdated ideas. It's truly a cult film. Zardoz is mentioned in The Simpsons, references in the series Community, and even gets a whole episode dedicated to it in Rick and Morty. So yes, in Zardoz, Sean Connery runs around in red briefs with a revolver. But the paradox is that beneath this absurdity lies a film that talks about the future of humanity far more seriously than many blockbusters. The film makes you think about the future of humanity in a unique way. Just a reminder, this is a Kino Underground video where I talk about forgotten, hidden but very unusual films. If you have ideas for a film that should be featured here, be sure to write them in the video comments. This was Max Chkonia, see you in the future, bye everyone!